Hey YouTube, Chris here. We're going to cut apart some boxes. I'm getting married in less than a month, so we've had things coming off the registry. And this will be a good opportunity for us to talk about replaceable or disposable in contrast to more permanent. Man, this first one's going to be loud, right? Ooh. Maybe this is a terrible idea. But of course, the reason I am taking these boxes apart is to recycle them. Flattening them out so we can put them downstairs for the recycling people pick up. And the reason I say we're comparing disposable from permanent is that when it comes to the kind of objects that get put on a wedding registry, right, it's often more permanent versions of things that, ooh, loud, right, that at earlier phases of our lives were disposable, temporary. There's this thing about IKEA furniture, and a lot of the furniture in my apartment right now is IKEA. It has been for probably the past 10, 15 years in different places I've lived. But it's kind of designed to be disposable in terms of you never really count on that IKEA bookshelf surviving one move to the next, right? Like it's going to break. It's going to completely, a lot of them can't even be taken back apart. Like they expect you're just going to demolish it when it's time to move. And that's of course the disposable model. In contrast to when we buy something a little more sturdy, a little more long-lasting, then we have something more permanent. And the point I wanted to bring to the surface today is that, of course, not only does this affect furniture, it affects lots of other little things in our lives as to whether or not we're using the $15 version of something or the $45 version of something. Now, I do want to make the distinction that this is not about luxury brands. This is not about high-end, super fancy, slap a logo on it and charge $6,000 kind of stuff. That's a whole different topic. That's not at all. I'm just talking about durable as opposed to the very lowest end of trying to save $5, $10 here and there. And one of the reasons why when people start getting married, they put these longer term versions of cookware, blenders, simple little things on their list, luggage, for example, is that what winds up happening is when you try to get the disposable cheap stuff and you try to save money on it, because it doesn't last, you wind up having to replace it. It gets torn up. It falls apart. The zipper stops working. Right? You wind up, it's not even worth repairing because buying a new one would be cheaper. Which almost sounds money saving until you realize that's because it costs so much to repair it, in contrast to how expensive it is to just buy it in the first place. But in addition to this applying to things, this also applies to, this is already flat enough. In addition to this applying to things, this also applies to our thoughts, right? This also applies to the mechanisms, the methods, the processes that we learn, the skills that we pick up. Because you're going to study differently for something if the only time you're ever going to need it is for a test tomorrow, than if it's a skill that you really expect to use for the rest of your life. And this is one of the inherent challenges, structural problems, but I never like to make it sound like it's somebody's fault. It's not like there's not some conspiracy. It's just the nature of learning and accountability and so on, that it so often winds up happening that what we learn in school can be kind of a disposable version of something, right? It's knowledge that they don't expect you to keep. It's temporary. It's disposable. They're counting on you to throw it out when you need better knowledge. Ooh, this one's a doozy. Get a tool involved. And a lot of the reason why I focus on hands-on learning with GAM Keto, with the approach I take in my video courses, is that, it's the kind of learning that gets deeply ingrained in us. There's the distinction in learning between tacit skills and episodic knowledge. And tacit skills are things like riding a bike, riding a unicycle, balancing, doing gymnastics, juggling. Right? It's these skills that when they use the expression like, oh, it's like riding a bike, it's with you for basically your lifetime. And part of what makes it tacit as opposed to episodic knowledge is that it's not just a thing you could sit down and read about. It's not just a thing that you learned about or told or can repeat. It's a thing you can do. It's kind of tied up in what some people call muscle memory, which we're not going to get into here details of how much that is or isn't a thing. It's wishy-washy idea. But it is to say, it's in contrast to something like, if you don't use it, you lose it kind of knowledge, which is disposable, temporary. It's expected, well, if I ever really needed to use this again, I could pick it up. And at that point, that works for a phase of our lives. That works while we're just trying to get through school. It works a lot less well when we are really trying to get serious about picking a direction and going that direction. That's where you want knowledge that's going to last. That's where temporary, disposable, not meant to be used for more than the next few weeks or the next semester, that's where that knowledge stops being useful. You got to decide to stop playing around. You got to decide to stop learning things for 1 week at a time. And to get serious about, if you want to do something with these skills, you're going to need tacit knowledge about how to apply them. And that's just not something that again, this is not anyone's fault, but that's not something the school system set up to evaluate. It's not something the school system set up to train people in. Speaking of which, it's actually one of the distinctions between why I prefer the term trainer as opposed to teacher for what I do, is that I train people in skills, right? If you go to a teacher and you come away from them afterwards, you expect to have new knowledge that they taught you. I'm not a knowledge teacher. I'm a skills trainer. When someone works with me, the objective, and we get there as best we can on whatever pace and whatever background we have to work with, is to equip somebody with skills they didn't have, to make it possible for them to do things that before they couldn't do. Or they didn't do as efficiently, they didn't do with as much confidence and clarity, they didn't do with as much knowledge of the other options. And even, through the word knowledge in there, even though that's sort of a form of knowing, it's still built on tacit knowledge. It's still built on, you've done it before. This is the same sort of reason why I keep bringing up occasionally sports metaphors for when I was a mixed martial artist or wrestler, is that those are fields that are obviously skill disciplines. They're obviously tacit skill. They're obviously, you don't sit there and read a book out of it. You don't study the idea. You don't talk about it a whole lot. You do it. And that's how you get better at it. That's how you apply it. That's what you do with it. And I think that anymore, people are pretty well educated, pretty well packed full of knowledge. Even if a lot of it's disposable, even if a lot of it's throwaway, have to relearn if they want to do anything with it. The real downside that we're really lacking is not enough people have that kind of tacit knowledge of how to do something with it. We even get people who come out of business programs with MBAs or a master's in administration or what is it? Anyway, we get people come out of business schools who they're full of ideas. They're full of graphs. They're full of thoughts. But what wasn't taught to them there, wasn't trained into them, was the skill of doing something with it. And it's a different kind of approach than being able to grade somebody on an outcome. It's got to be a lot of project-based stuff, which once again is why in Gamketo and in my training, it's all project-based. I don't do quizzes. I don't do multiple choice. I don't do solve for X. I do make it do X, Y, or Z. And when it does it, it's pretty clear you know how to do that. Now, unfortunately, it's still the reality we live in that a lot of interview filters like that college degree. They like the sign that somebody's willing to pack themselves with knowledge, regurgitate it, follow orders, do the boring part. That's the way I heard. Ian Davis, founder of Mad Dog Games, had a probably interview with him 15, 16 years ago, one of the first people in game industry I interviewed. And he was saying that to him, the reason grades were important for a game development company in this case wasn't because he cared if you knew biology, wasn't because he cared if you knew physics. It was because he wanted to see that was someone who would be willing to do the work that wasn't fun, wasn't interesting, and still follow through on it. So it really is basically this symbolic thing of like what you're learning is less important than are you willing to learn? Are you willing to put up with that kind of structured evaluation of yourself? Which, for a certain size of company, makes sense. But man, when you're working for yourself, what's important is you're just able to do. You're able to apply the stuff you know how to do. And the other bit is, we know what you're in it for. Because if what you're in it for is that you want to make games, I know people with a PhD related to games that still can't make games because they have no tacit skill. They have no permanent skill in it. all they ever picked up was episodic knowledge. Things they read about, things they were told that they can repeat. A pile of knowledge does not make a game developer. Knowledge is not as much power as the old quote might have led us. Oh. At best, it makes us a tool to somebody else who's willing to actually do something with it. Get things done. And so anyway, I just wanted to discuss today. Obviously rambled a little bit. Hopefully the sounds aren't too loud from the unpacking of these boxes into recycling. But by the way, recycle if you can. You know, I figure that goes without saying. I know there's a lot of areas of the country where it's not convenient. Listen, I grew up in Missouri, small town. I understand. There was, at the time there, recycling was not an option. Here in California, it's an option, so it's worth the extra trouble when we can. But it's just one more form, right, of disposable, reusable. Some of this might be less reusable from all the tape and whatever, but hope they can sort that out. But yeah, you know, just like in order to continue maturing in your life, you got to transition out of the disposable stuff to the more permanent stuff. That's not just true for stuff. It's also true for your thoughts, true for your skills, true for how you approach things, true for your philosophy about life, true for your attitude, true for your social engagements with others. And, you know, like I briefly alluded to earlier, long term, it can actually be less expensive to buy a $45 of something once than to spend $15 replacing it 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 times. And so the same sort of thing happens too, where in my training materials, you know, my second video course is $45, but it works. And what'll often have happen is somebody will just take a whole bunch of like free stuff they can scrounge together, not including my free course, which of course is a stepping stone into the second course. And they still never have any traction. They still have no forward progress. They still can't show any skill from it because they're trying to get the temporary disposable version. So, I don't know. If you want lasting skills, occasionally involves a minor, modest investment in it. But again, I'm not talking crazy, ludicrous brand value kind of cost. Not saying you need a Porsche logo on something. Whew. Almost done though. And of course, I'm gonna have to truck all this stuff down to the garage. It's kind of nice, isn't it? Taking things apart. Kind of fun. I think this is one of these things. This is gonna be a random side thought here. That as little kids, like we wanted to do, but we weren't allowed to play with scissors. Maybe some of us. My mom was pretty overprotective. Still is. And we thought it looked fun, but then once we get older and we have to do it, somehow some people kind of lose the sense of fun in it. This is still really fun. This is still pretty awesome. I am destroying this box. It rocks. But yeah, you know, these last two boxes actually we're going to keep whole. They're actually not even opened yet. Those are some gifts we ordered for some other people as thanks. So, mission complete. Thank you for keeping me company during this little bit of box chopping today. As always, look forward to making another video for you tomorrow. In fact, if you have any thoughts as to situations where you have either made the mistake of getting something temporary and then finding long-term it costs you more than if you would have got something even slightly higher grade, or the other way around, of where you've had no regrets from you invested even slightly, even modestly. Again, I'm not talking massive capital, but just like very modestly and doing something the right way, and it's really giving you a stronger foundation that you've been able to build on, stay with, and so on. Let us know down below in the comments. And yeah, have another video for you tomorrow. Bye for now.